Alright, so hello one and all, welcome back to another Mushoku Tensei skipped content review thing. We are here with Season 2, Part 1, Episode 5. And so, let's jump into things. We start off with a detailed description of how the three magical nations operate and what makes them special. The Ranoa Kingdom was the largest country in the central continent's northern region and had about the same kind of influence as the Sharon Kingdom had in the south. However, Ranoa had an alliance with Bashrant and Neris. Together, these three were the three magical nations. Together, these three countries poured a tremendous amount of resources into magical research, which gathered exceptional people from around the world. Ranoa Kingdom was created for that purpose and acted as the leader of the alliance, and within it was the magic city of Sharia, which homed the Ranoa Magic University, the Magicians Guild's headquarters, and the Neris Magical Implements Workshop. From a sky view, the Magicians Guild would be at its center, built from the magic-resistant brick. In the east lies the Student District, which is where the university was, and in the west, the Magical Implement Workshop acted as the heart of the Workshop District. North, in the Commerce District, was the Traders Guild, and the south was the Lodging District, which obviously had housing and inns. This layout was nearly identical to Militian's layout, and Rudius thinks that it was, inspired by it. Because Alenalise didn't like the cold and would snuggle up to Rudius, obviously he couldn't really take that, and was forced to book a higher-end inn with a fireplace in their rooms. As for how Alenalise can pay for an enrollment at Ranoa University, she not only has a lot of money saved up with various different currencies, but also has many valuable crystals and gems that she could sell. The two had made their way to the university, where some guard gave them directions to where they needed to go. Circling back to the Magician's bricks for a moment, the Magicians Guild had a monopoly on the sale and production of magic-resistant bricks, and were so expensive that the only place that they were used in the Sur Kingdom was its capital, and Rudius hadn't even seen any in Milis or the King Dragon Realm. But here, it was used in even the Adventurers Guild. How to make them was a secret, but it's possible that the materials themselves weren't too costly, and rather it was how they are made that is where the value lies. The two made their way to a large plaza with a large statue of a magician girl in its center. The plate attached read, First Principal, 56th Generational Leader of the Magicians Guild, Frau Claudia. In front of them loomed a mansion that looked almost like a fortress with 6 other buildings surrounding it. To the left were many large buildings with red roofs, lots of windows and verandas. It was likely that these were the student dorms. And to the right of the building was a blue roof, which was where they were headed. Alenalise is quite excited by all these large buildings, but of course, it's not overly impressive compared to the kinds of tall buildings that we see in our world. Although I'm sure the architecture is nothing to scoff at. It's probably much better than most of what we see in our world. Anyway, they meet with a receptionist and wait in the waiting room, with Alenalise fondling Rudius the entire time for about 20 minutes before Genus shows up, which was kind of fast considering Rudius had just arrived without any warning. Genus mentions that most magicians as young as Rudius are quite prideful, and Rudius concurs. People are considered to be adults by the age of 15 in this world, and those who became adventurers before that mostly never grew any stronger past that. And for the few who did, almost always grew an oversized ego. Two people came to mind when Rudius thinks about this. The first is Sarah, which makes sense, although she's not a magician, but the idea still applies, right? She was a prodigy with the bow. And the second person is some no-name B-rank magician who had gotten himself killed. But Genus probably thought that Rudius was just like them. Anyway, as Rudius and Genus headed over to where the test would take place, he says that this school has courses tailored to noblemen, arithmetic courses for merchants and business, as well as so much more. All of which would always have some element of magic education tied into it, of course. And so that's why mental health wasn't exactly a course provided at the school. It's not like this world lacks mental health treatment, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's not great. It's not that it doesn't exist entirely, it's just not at Ranoa. As they enter the building, inside resembled something like a school's gym. Currently there was a 4th year class consisting of mostly noblemen using the gym. In the gym were 4 magic circles with a radius about 5 meters each. I know this isn't 5 meters, but These magic circles were not only just Saint tier healing circles, but they were also confined by an advanced tier burial circle. To note, the one that Pax had trapped Rudius in was a king tier, so it could withstand both physical and magic attacks. This one, being only advanced, could only repel magic. And so Genus wanted Rudius to spar against the only silent spellcaster at the academy, Fitz. There was a teacher that knew silent spellcasting here, and we've talked about them quite a few times now, mainly Timothy's old teacher. He's mentioned him a couple times, but this teacher had unfortunately passed away just last year. Anyway, in the match between Rudius and Fitz, Rudius used Disturb Magic and fired a single stone cannon, almost reflexively aiming straight for the head, but decided to aim just beside it, which only scratched Fitz's cheek. This stone cannon completely shattered the advanced tier barrier and even destroyed the magic-resistant bricks that the building was made from. That's pretty powerful. Anyway, a month had passed and we get the same kind of details about special students as in the anime. They don't have to pay for attend classes, other than the monthly classes anyway, and you could use all the resources that the school had to offer with no charge of any kind. Although you could do nearly anything, it wasn't like you were exempt from the law. You would still have to be held accountable for your actions if you were to do something illegal, or if it would be disrespectful to the Magician's Guild, or if it disturbed them in any way. The rules were actually very lax in comparison to even the Adventurers Guild, and that's because there's a lot of different kinds of people represented at the school. You had all sorts of races, including demons who were hated by the people of Millis faith, or beast folk who tended to be isolationists. Although there were no sky folk or sea folk, that's just due to none wanting to enroll. And the ages of all the students ranged from 10 to over 100 in some cases. The school even accepted human royalty of those who had been driven from their country, or noble children who were cursed. And those with curses like Alenalise's, where she has to do things in order to live. So there's a good reason why such rules exist, or rather don't exist. Also, yes, I'm implying that Alenalise is allowed to do what she wants so long as she doesn't force herself upon anyone. But speaking of Alenalise, she had to enroll under a general admission, which costed 3 Asuran gold coins, which doesn't sound like a lot, but even 1 gold coin was enough to live comfortably here for a while. Plus, if you had exceptional grades, you could receive a bit of exemption from tuition and enrollment fees. Plus, if they didn't have the money, you could always wait to pay when you graduate. There's a lot of options here. It seems like a better system than most schools in our world, actually. This overly free mindset, though, of the academy with its lax rules was opposed quite strongly by the Temple Knights of the Millis country, though. Because they were halfway across the world, they couldn't really do anything about this. The only real force that could even hope to oppose the 3 magic nations would be Asura, but even that's questionable just because of... Asura's not doing well. Like, they are a wealthy country, but they've got their issues. And the enrollment period of students was 7 years. You could take a year abroad twice for a maximum of 9 years total of study. If you became a researcher affiliated with the Magician's Guild, you could continue using the university's equipment after graduation. This could just be one of the perks of being a C-rank member of the Magician's Guild, however. For more information on how Magician Guilds work and its rankings, check out last week's skipped content about episode 4. It was a very short one, but it talked quite a bit about the Magician's Guild. But anyway, the university itself had a 5-story dormitory, but you weren't forced to stay there if you didn't want to. Those who owned a house within the city simply just commuted from home. However, most students were residents on campus. Usually 2 students would share a room, but Rudius had rather taken a room alone since he wasn't exactly here to make friends. He was here to fix his ED. If he wanted his wealth, he could have moved into an exclusive room for noblemen, which would have been much bigger and secure, but it would have cost a little bit more money. It's not really something that Rudius needs. And as for the bathroom, there was one in the hallway which was actually flushable, kind of. You had to manually pour water into it to flush it down, so it's not like there's like a lever or anything that you can just pull. There's always someone on duty to replace the water jug that needed to flush the toilets, but because Rudius was a special student, he was exempt from like being tasked to do that. Plus, the school encouraged you to use water magic instead, so it's a magic school, so it makes sense. And then there's the school's uniforms that were provided. The men wore suits while the women wore a blazer and a skirt. These were actually just introduced this year. Rudius then sluts up Alenalise's uniform and he heads off for the opening ceremony. The vice principal gives his speech as Alenalise picks out her prey, and then Ariel makes her speech, who again is emphasized to have insane charisma and charm, unlike a certain woman sitting right next to Rudius. Rudius enters the special student zone, which it seems like that regular students can't enter, and he goes into the classroom. He reunites with Zenoba, then meets Linnea, Persenna, and Cliff. The biggest travesty here is that the anime skips out on Persenna's amazing catchphrase, "Fuck." That's all what she says, that's her catchphrase, and it's funny every single time. There's no need for her to say it, but she does anyway, and it's fun. She's a funny character. I know swearing isn't like, it's not comedy on its own. You have to pick and choose when to use it, but fuck. Right? But anyway, the way that Zenoba treats Rudius reminded him of old younger classmates who were in awe that he had been able to build a computer on his own, and Zenoba being bullied obviously reminded him of his past life. They did cut out an odd thing when it came to Cliff's interaction, though. After Cliff said that he knew Eris, Rudius asked what else she told him, and Cliff said that Eris said that Rudius was small. Obviously, that's not exactly what Eris meant because she didn't see his thing at the time, although I wonder if she's probably seen his dick before. But that's obviously not what she meant, and that's not what Cliff meant either. But Rudius took it to say that his member was small, and that cut him very deep. Cutting him even deeper was when he told Cliff that he and Eris had gone their separate ways, and Cliff said, "Good, you're not suitable for her anyway." Like, damn, he's cold-hearted. But something that the anime cuts out as well is everything that Silent 7 had done for the academy. She's a third-year student who had increased the items on the school's menu, created magical implements, and introduced uniforms to the academy. On top of all that, rumor has it that one of the 7 great powers had recommended her, so she's getting extra special treatment. After the monthly homeroom finished, all the other students had gone to their next classes. It made sense why someone like Cliff would attend class, but to understand why girls like Linnea and Persenna would actually care about classes, check out my episode 0 skip content for a badass Fitz scene that explains exactly why. Rudius decided to take his time to get familiar with the university, and so he had explored around a little bit. Going past the infirmary, there were many beds with multiple healers in it, and it was listed as Medical Office 1, meaning there were multiple on the school grounds, which I guess made sense. Next, he had gone to the gym storehouse, which was near the gym that Rudius had like his test against Fitz at. Although it technically wasn't a gym storehouse, it was like a shed for practice equipment. There weren't many mats or anything there for your standard school gym practices. Everything in here was related to sparring and magical practice. Rudius wanted to check out the roof, but because of the snow, most buildings had sloping roofs. There was one building that had a flat top, but it didn't interest him that much to want to go. But finally, he had traveled to the library, which was about 10 minutes away from the main campus. It was a grand 2-story building and apparently had a strict access since Rudius got questioned by a gatekeeper there before being allowed entrance. You weren't allowed to use magic in the library at all, and taking books out of the library was strictly prohibited. But there was a small section that you could borrow from, and the method is much like the structure in our world. Although I don't know how schools and libraries do it nowadays, 90s, early 2000s way of checking a book out. But a lot of the rules were similar to a library in our world, but the destruction of a book could result in fine or possible expulsion. Most books in the library were just copies, but remember, printers don't exist in this world. Everything is handwritten, so destroying one book, even if it's just a copy, is destroying days worth of work. Or weeks, depending on the book. Rudius then begins exploring the library and finds that most of the books are written in the human tongue, but among them were those written in the demon god tongue and beast god tongue, and even one that he found in the fighting god tongue. There were a few books that he had found that he couldn't exactly recognize the language, which meant that they were likely written in the sky god tongue or the sea god tongue, something that Rudius isn't really able to learn just because he's never been around anybody that could teach him, and he hasn't found like a dictionary for their language. But anyway, from there, he ran into Fitz, and as Rudius apologized, someone came to mind from his past life. Someone he knew named Masa was basically able to glide through life and had one simple method. Get on your hands and knees and apologize before anything bad happens. So obviously, that works wonders for Rudius. He does that a lot. Not that Fitz was even mad at him to begin with, though. But anyway, Rudius finds the book, an exploratory account on the Teleportation Labyrinth by Animus Macedonius, the book that Fitz recommended. The book was basically a memoir of how Animus, an adventurer who came from the northern territories, had explored the teleportation labyrinth located in the labyrinth city of Rapant, coincidentally where Zenith is located. The labyrinth was a rare kind where all the traps were teleportation themed, and as a reminder, labyrinth are kind of like living creatures, like they're not alive, but they grow from mana. I go into a full breakdown of labyrinths in, I believe it's my season 1 episode 4 skip content video. This is a while ago. But in this labyrinth were 5 highly intelligent monsters that understood the layouts of the labyrinth and knew where the teleportation traps would send a person. If you activated a trap, you would most certainly find a monster waiting for you on the other end. But as Animus continued further down the labyrinth, he had found that there were actually three main types of traps. The first was a fixed one-way teleporter. It had a set destination with no way of return. The second was a fixed two-way teleporter. It had a set destination, but you could return back to where you just were. And the third is a random teleporter that teleported you somewhere random, I guess. It's pretty self-explanatory. The main method of progressing the labyrinth was to use these teleporters to go further into it, but you could accidentally activate a random teleporter and you'd be sent instantly anywhere and you'd be separated from your party, unless you were touching someone at the time, which in that case you would be teleported together. Paul had actually accidentally done that with either Ghislaine or Lenalice, I don't remember. Either way, they weren't happy with it. As he progressed, though, he had gotten really good at identifying which teleporters did what. However, it wasn't foolproof, as he had accidentally gotten separated from his comrades, and he was the only one who managed to escape alive, albeit now with one less arm. This reminded Rudius of RPGs with labyrinths. However, those ones were designed to be solved. The ones here generally led to the labyrinth's crystal core, but it was never a guarantee. There wasn't a designed path for you to go down. It was all random. It wasn't like Diablo or anything, where there was a strict path for you to go with a couple branching options. That's not how the real world works, pal. Anyway, the back of the book was filled with a bunch of theories as how the teleportation works. For example, when randomly teleported, why aren't you teleported inside of the Earth? Animus hypothesized that it was due to the resistance between the mana at the destination and the mana of the person being teleported, which was the same principle that explained why you couldn't cast an offensive spell right into a person's body. However, an exception made to this is healing magic, where you do put mana into someone's body. This could be Rudius thinks why he can't do incantationless healing. But back to the teleportation question. He thinks that it could simply be due to the strengths of the teleportation not being strong enough to throw you inside of the Earth. You can cast offensive magic into the dirt, so it could just simply be that it's so much more dense that it costs an obscene amount of magical power to teleport someone inside of inside of the ground or whatever. So it could be that it just costs an obscene amount of magical power to teleport someone within a wall or the ground or something. But as Rudius thought this, it had turned noon. And to be honest with that first hypothesis that Animus had, I don't exactly know how it works, to be honest. I don't understand it. I'm just reciting what was said in the book. So if it was a little confusing to you, it was a little confusing to me as well. My apologies. Anyway, again, it's noon. Rudius and Zenoba had made their way to the cafeteria, which was a 3-story building. The first floor was for adventurers and demon folk. The second floor was for human commoners and beast folk, and the third floor was for human royalty and nobility. This wasn't for the sake of discrimination, but rather for classification and to lower the amount of political conflict that would break out if certain groups were to interact. Zenoba hated the lack of table manners of those on the first floor. Lydia and Persenna resided on the second floor, and so he always took to the third floor. However, with how fancy everyone is on that floor, Rudius felt quite uncomfortable. And that's when a certain Notos Grey Rat came around with 2 girls on his arms, as many others followed. Someone asked if she could come on his next date, but he turned her down, saying, "No, I'm sorry, miss, but I've already decided I can take only 2 girls on a date at one time. I only have 2 arms, you know, so if I invited 3 girls, one would be left out, right? I'm sorry, but I am a popular man, you know. Let's go on a date some other time. I think my left arm is free next month." This douchebag. But apparently it works. Anyway, after the interactions, Luke's eyes landed on Rudius, and he stared daggers into him. Rudius introduces himself as Luke says, "Yeah, I know. I've heard about you from Fitz. Apparently you're insanely forgetful." Luke gave his name before shoving past Rudius as the girls started to mock him in his robe. It is 5 years old now, so we should probably get a new one. And after that interaction, Rudius and Zenoba came to a compromise and decided to eat lunch outside. Rudius created some stone tables and chairs, all of which Zenoba was insanely impressed with, of course, and he told Rudius everything that he knew about Ariel, Luke, and Fitz. Part of this is a recap from everything that we know so far, but a good bit of it is new information, so I'll just go over it. Ariel is currently 17 years old and is the second princess of Asura. She's the only daughter of the crowned queen, and after Ariel's birth, her mother's health had taken a turn for the worse and was unable to have any more children. Aside from Ariel, her 2 brothers, the first Prince Grable and the second Prince Helfast, were competing for the throne. The powerful people of the Asura kingdom formed factions behind them, hoping to back the prince who would become king, then reap the benefits. However, with the size of each group, not all were certain to get the rewards that would come. Even those like ministers were ranked in the hierarchy, so it would be given that the bottom would be ignored. When Halfast was born, those who didn't get rewarded for following Grable had switched alliances to the second prince. Ariel's faction, however, was the weakest of the three, and when the teleportation incident occurred, some of her most powerful members had lost their standing. Ariel had two guards with her, one of them being Silent Fitz, her guardian mage. The only thing people knew about him was his accomplishments in saving the princess's life, but also that he's an elf. That's kind of it. No one even knew who his master was, who taught him voiceless spellcasting. And then there was Luke Noto's Grey Rat, her guardian knight, who was the second son of Paimon Noto's Grey Rat, who was the head of the Notos family. He had been raised since birth to become Ariel's guardian knight. Despite her fleeing the country, he had continued to stay by her side in the event that she managed to regain power and return to fight for the throne. From the moment that she enrolled at the academy, he had been continuously bathed in limelight, making him a target for envy, fear, and respect. Zenoba was actually forced to learn all this by Alinea and Persenna. But Rudius wonders if he's getting bullied. But Zenoba says that that isn't the case. It's just that he had conceded defeat after losing to them. After that, Rudius had gone back to the library to do more studying, but he realized that, well, he just wasn't smart enough to tackle the subject without any kind of notebook, and so it was getting late and he had gone over to the school store to pick out some paper, pen, and ink, and some string to tie the paper with. In the shop were magical textbooks, magical crystals, robes, wooden swords, beginner wands, bags, shoes, and soap among other daily essentials. There were also food items like dried meat, smoked meat, as well as bottles of drinking water and alcohol. What an awesome school. I wonder if there's a rule about drinking in classes. However, what is odd is that it's stated that there's a rule against drinking on campus. So I don't know if this is just wrong. Again, there are a couple things that they contradict each other in the books. This is kind of one of them. I know it doesn't matter, but I don't know. They might sell alcohol at the school. They might not. I don't know. Anyway, the scene with Goliath went the same, and so did the conversation between Fitz and Rudius. However, it's already at this point that Rudius admits that he might be falling for Fitz and would lick his feet if requested. And that is it for episode 5's skipped content. So we kind of just generally learn a lot more about the school. We get a little bit more character interaction between people. We learn more about Ariel, Fitz, and Luke. And that's kind of it. There's not a whole lot that was necessarily skipped, but it's just a lot of lore and backstory and information that's kind of needed soon, I guess, that is skipped, unfortunately. A lot of foreshadowing, I guess, and a lot of building blocks for characters' development and whatnot. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, give it a like and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.